Hi, I'm Phil Craig.
And I'm Andrew Loney.
And together we aim to bring you the most scandalous stories and some of the most scandalous people in history. So thanks for joining us here on the ScandalMongers podcast. Andrew, are you ready to go on a journey in time?
Yes, back to my youth.
Yes, the late 19th century, your heyday.
My heyday. Yes, and an unknown scandal to many people, but a really interesting one, I think, with huge consequences.
Absolutely. I'm trying to make a date with Lucy for ages, and she lives and works she's Lucy Coatman, our guest in this episode. She lives and works in Vienna. She's written loads of really interesting things about the Habsburg Empire, and especially the greatest scandal, one of the Europe's greatest ever scandals, really, Mayerling, and what is reported to be a murder-suicide pact between the heir to the throne of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which is the empire we don't talk about much, but it was really important and really powerful. And guess what? It ends up leading the world to the First World War. So
in some ways, the man who comes to the throne, if given Rudolph has died, is the man who's assassinated in 1914. Because in some ways, his behavior might have been very different to Rudolph's behavior.
That's right. It's so there's big history. Lots of sexual intrigue, allegations of drug use and affairs and murders and all the stuff that we like.
Cover-ups.
Oh, yes, definitely cover-ups, for sure. And mad conspiracy theories.
Missing archives. It's all there this week.
All there. And it's nice we say we're trying to avoid royalty. Well, this is a royal story, but it's not about the Windsors and it's not about the 21st century. So that's that. What else do we need to talk about? Well, we have other interesting things coming up. You want to do a quick taster, Andrew, on what's to come in the
Yes, I mean, we've got a lot of stories, again, very varied, moving away from, well, always some tangential link to the royals. We're talking to James Fox about his book, White Mischief, about the Errol murder in Africa during the World War II. We're talking down to Corsi about Lord Snowdon, which he wrote a very good biography. We've got a new author, an author of a new book on Vassal, who was a spy to mark LGBT month. And he's got some new things to say there about British society and hypocrisy. What else have we got?
Well, hopefully the next week we've got the blood scandal, the infected blood scandal, which is
exactly
one of those great British stories that rumbles on and nobody seems to kind of take much notice and then explodes like the post office scandal. And everybody says, oh my God, this has been going on for decades. And thousands of casualties given infected blood products by the National Health Service.
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating story.
What a story.
We want to have this mixture of contemporary, I suppose, scandals, which we want to shine a light on, historical mysteries and stories like the Mayerling one, and then we will continue to do some royal stories as well.
Indeed. A few people are finding us, I'm just going to name check a few people. I'll have to do this. Sarah Williams has found us. Fascinating podcast, interesting guests. As a side note, I loved Andrew's Traitor King book. There you go, Andrew. You're a fan.
Oh, thank you.
I love your podcast, says Mary Partridge 5154. Who else has been recently joining us? Paul Thew. Most pleased to see a man, because I think most of not that I'm in any way complaining about our many female fans, but it's nice to get a range. Paul Thew has discovered us and say he's in Australia. He finds our shows interesting and enjoyable and insightful.
And we were big in Bahrain last week, weren't we?
Yeah, we keep popping up in slightly unlikely places in the lower reaches, but definitely on the charts. Places like Sweden recently, Iceland, and Bahrain. And
so maybe that was the Kuwait story. Who knows? We'd love to know why you listen in, how you hear about us.
Indeed. If you're in Bahrain listening in or watching us, let us know why. And don't stop. That's really important.
And I mean, we've always traditionally gone out on a Monday, but if you feel that you'd like to hear us more often, we are thinking possibly about doing an occasional midweek story. We've got lots backed up, but also, should we be doing 2 stories in a week, or do you feel it's better just focusing on one story and just having an hour and no more? So this sort of feedback is helpful to us, and we can give you what you want.
Yeah, I have to say, I've enjoyed the last few weeks, but they are getting a bit long. So maybe we need to watch that. All right. Well, let's get frocked up, put on some Strauss, get some cake, some coffee.
And off to the Vienna woods.
Off we go to Vienna. See you soon.
See you soon.
So welcome, Lucy, and I've been looking forward to this for some time. We've been playing kind of tag over Twitter, but
yeah, that's true.
tell us everything we need to know. I mean, maybe at first you should. A lot of people won't know anything. The very basic 1 minute upsum of why this was such a huge story.
Why
what the story is.
Yeah, so the story is that Crown Prince Rudolph of Austria, so the heir to the throne of the Austro-Hungarian monarchy, was found dead alongside his 17-year-old mistress, Baroness Mary Vestera, on the 30th of January 1889. And what happens is one of the biggest cover-ups or attempts to cover up what happened in history. It can't be known that Mary was found dead alongside Rudolph, because this would firstly completely destroy the reputation of the imperial house, but also cause problems with a Catholic burial for the crown prince. So what happens is just honestly a mess, and is very hurtful to Mary's family. And of course, the truth starts to come out, but because there's this cover-up, all of these conspiracy theories start to arise, from assassination to they survived and actually Rudolph is Woodrow Wilson, for example. So lots of crazy stories start to come up after this.
Well, I can see Rudolph behind your shoulder. Is that him?
There he is.
There's a bit of a pin-up. I mean, he was he was an incredibly important man, wasn't he? He was heir to one of the great thrones of Europe. And what sort of a man was he?
A complicated man, for starters. So he was a very sensitive kind of guy. He was very much like his mother, Empress Elizabeth, very intellectual. And he had a great interest in the natural sciences, for example. He actually wanted to study at the university, but his father felt, this is not appropriate for the heir to the throne. The heir to the throne has to be a soldier. And this was made clear from the moment Rudolph was born, actually. So he gets command of his own infantry regiments from the moment he's born. And he is raised this way by his tutor. So it's a very military education. He's woken up in the middle of the night with gunshots. He's made to do drills. I mean, this at the age of 3 and 4, very, very young. And is told that he's going to get eaten by a wild boar when he gets locked in the Lions Nature Reserve. So, back then, this was normal for an heir to the throne. You look at Kaiser Wilhelm II and his childhood and what he went through. Also, Rudolph's future wife, Stephanie, had quite a brutal upbringing. Doesn't mean, even if it's normal, it doesn't mean that that's something that a 3 or 4-year-old child can cope with. We know now that these first years are really important for the developments of the human psyche. So this had a huge impact on him because he became extremely anxious. His family, his friends noted that he was always quite on edge. He was very easily made nervous. I'm an English native speaker, and yet I'm really struggling to speak English after spending all my time in Vienna. Daily problem. And
how old was he when the scandal happens? He's a lot older
30.
than 30.
Yeah.
Okay.
And did he have mental health problems? I mean, there's some suggestion he was bipolar, for example.
Yeah, so his sister Maria Valerie wrote in her diary that she suspected he had some kind of depression. The problem here is that the way they understood depression and other mental illnesses was completely different back then. They had different names for the illnesses depending on the country, but it seems, some kind of depression. And as his friends noted, a lot of anxiety, really, really deep anxiety, I guess, as a result of what he endured as a really young child.
And
so
when this took place,
sorry.
So when this took place, I mean, you said there were lots of theories. I mean, there's some suggestion that it was double suicide, that there was a murder and a suicide. I mean, some suggestions you say that the French came and killed him. I mean, what were the theories that were sort of circulating?
Yeah, so the first thing that happens is the people who first see the bodies don't really take a good look and just see all of the blood coming out of Rudolph's mouth and think, this is like the way people die from a certain type of poison. So they go to the Hofburg and they say this, and this is what the imperial family think, until the doctor goes and investigates and said, yeah, he shot Mary and then himself. But at this point, there's already been different announcements to the public. So you've got the announcement of a heart attack, of a stroke, and then they finally announce that it was a suicide, but they don't mention Mary. Of course, people talk. People love to gossip. That's just what we do. And you get other theories, such as it was an assassination that was done by Franz Josef, that it was done under Archduke Albrecht, who was Rudolph's great uncle, and they didn't get along so much. You've got a story that it was actually one of Mary's uncles who goes to Mayerling to try and protect her honor. You've also got the story of a party that just goes horribly wrong and Rudolph gets hit over the head with a bottle of champagne. And you also have from Empress Zita, for example, this is the one that really gets repeated the most, is that he was killed by the French, by Clemenceau, which doesn't make too much sense because Rudolph and Clemenceau actually were friends.
But
So
there's a
Andrew is
political
rushing
element.
ahead. Andrew is rushing ahead, and I'm going to stop you. Stop it, Andrew.
Hold on,
I know you love cover-ups, but I love a bit of romance. So
Yeah.
I need to know more about their, how they met. Was he married?
Mhm.
He obviously was married.
Mhm.
Did he have other lovers? I mean, she's very young. Was that normal?
Mhm.
Let's get into that element of it first.
He had supposedly 30 illegitimate children, didn't he?
What?
Yeah, there's a lot of different numbers that go around, and there are still some descendants who claim to be from Rudolph, even though the DNA test proved that this wasn't true. He definitely had a couple for sure, but I think it's really hard to say the exact number. So yeah, he had a lot of mistresses. There is a rumor, I've never seen this supposed document, so I can't say if it's true, but apparently he kept a diary of all of the women he slept with, and if they were a virgin, he marked it in red. Yeah, he wrote his first will and he ended it with a kiss to all of the beautiful women of Vienna who he loved so much. Yeah, and so he actually took one of his mistresses along with him to Belgium when he got engaged to Princess Stephanie of Belgium. So yeah, he was a ladies' man, I guess, which not unusual again for a man of his status at the time. But if he loved anyone, I suspect it was his mistress Mitzi Casper. So she was, yeah, pretty much a high-class prostitute working for Madame Wolf. And he bought her a house, for example. He left her a lot of money. And he spent his last night before going to Mayerling with her. And he actually offered her the suicide pact the summer before he offered it to Mary. And she said no, went to the police. They said, we can't get involved in imperial affairs. But as for Mary, when she was a teenager, like a lot of teenagers, she collected photographs of Rudolph. Very normal at the time, just kind of collect and swap these carte de visite photos. And then she saw him on April the 12th, 1888, from afar at the races, and she wrote in her diary that a passion was born. And from then on, it was only Rudolph for Mary. So she was very aware of, the expectations for a girl of her status. I mean, she wasn't high aristocracy, but she was a baronet. She was moving in very, very high circles. And so she'd had potential suitors. Sorry, the cats are chasing each other, very distracting. And she was aware of what was expected for her, but she was such romantic. She filled out a questionnaire when she was 14, and you see she loves Beethoven. She writes her motto is in French. I won't try the French, but the translation is, I love to be loved as I love when I love. Very complicated, but you see already at a young age, she's quite a romantic. She's reading a lot of romantic novels, and then she sees the Crown Prince.
So she's an impressionistic teenager.
Yeah.
He's a man of the world with multiple mistresses.
Yeah.
I guess I can understand why she would fall for him, but why would he fall for her?
It's a question if he really did fall for her. It's very hard to reconstruct. So she got lucky in that her uncle was actually having an affair with Rudolph's cousin. And so she was able to use this cousin, Marie Lariche, as a way to get contact to Rudolph. So she writes a letter, Marie Lariche passes it on, and Rudolph agrees to meet her. And I think he's fascinated by this kind of morbid fascination that she herself has, because at their first meeting, she actually goes to his desk and he's got a skull on his desk that he'd been given as a gift by Professor Zuckerkandel some years before. She picks it up. There's also a gun. Hi, Brunhilde the cat. And he tries to take it away from her and she says, I'm not afraid of this. I think he's like, someone who is kind of sharing the similar view with me. And she also is very obsessed with following suicide pacts in the news. She will ask a French teacher to discuss these pacts with her and this kind of thing. So I think he saw someone that firstly was just madly in love with him, which maybe he'd never experienced before, was willing to do anything for him, and then who might be willing to die alongside him in the suicide pact that he'd already offered to Mitzi.
So he was already interested in basically dying with a woman.
Oh yeah. Suicide pacts were pretty don't want to say en vogue, but they were, when people were killing themselves in Vienna at the time, it tended to be in suicide pacts. I think you're surrounded by Wagner and Liebestod and Goethe and all of these kinds of forms of art that were popular at the time. It probably had an influence.
Is it true that, it's said that she was the legitimate child of the Emperor Franz Joseph, and that she was pregnant at the time, and also that Rudolph had basically tired of her?
Yeah, so these rumors come up that she could be the illegitimate child of Franz Joseph is not true. So there is this one historian who said that Mary's mother and Franz Joseph had an affair, but the dating she gives makes Helena like 3 years old at the time of the affair or something like this, and there's no documentary basis. Helena did try to have a bit of an affair with Rudolph, unsuccessfully. She tried to shower him with gifts, and the court were very shocked by her behavior. As for Mary being pregnant, we know that can't be the case because their first sexual contact was not so long before Mayerling. So it was on January the 13th. They died on January the 30th. And she wrote a letter to one of her confidants that she told about the affair. And she said, we belong to each other, body and soul. I became a woman. Yeah, so it's pretty clear what she's talking about there. So there couldn't have been a pregnancy, or if there was, it would not have been known at the time of their deaths. As to him wanting to get rid of her, I think it's Count Poyos who says, yeah, Rudolph really wanted to get rid of her. It's so hard to reconstruct what Rudolph thought because we don't have his letters to Mary. So she had to destroy them or give them back to Maria Larich as soon as she read them. She did manage to copy one where he says something like, I can't live without you. Come to me as soon as possible, but be discreet so that we don't get caught, because if I can't see you, I'm going to go insane. Sorry,
this relationship was only weeks old. I hadn't really realized that. They didn't really know each other at all, but they were just both shared this kind of romantic idea of death.
Yeah, they'd known each other for about 3 months. They first met on November the 5th, 1888, and then were dead on January the 30th, 1889. Really not a long time.
And the stories that he in fact was trying to get her to leave that night and go back to Vienna, and that he would kill himself on his own, or is the idea of the dual suicide pact now pretty certain?
I think the suicide pact is pretty certain for a couple of things. Mary already writes her will on January the 18th, for example. They've also already, she says to one of her confidants that they've been talking about, after a couple of happy hours somewhere out in wherever, we will kill ourselves and this kind of thing. And she'd also written a note for him in the Hofburg that the police commission found afterwards, and she wrote, use a revolver, it's deadlier. So you've got these kinds of things. Who knows if they then had a fight in Mayerling of, no, let's not do this, but that's something we'll never be able to confirm.
Do you know why? Do you know why? I suppose it's a stupid question, maybe. We'll never see it. I know you're writing a book about her, but why do you think she was so obsessed with death herself?
She experienced a lot of loss. So her older brother actually died in the fire at the Ring Theater a couple of years earlier, and since that moment, it awakened something in her. So she was often asking where her brother was now. Was he in heaven? Where is his spirit? This kind of thing. And then she also experienced the death of her father. So she was closer to her mother than her father. And she never got to say goodbye to him. So he was a retired diplomat, and he was working on the debt case in Egypt. So he died in Cairo of a stroke. And if they had gotten the boat that they originally planned to get, then they would have made it to say goodbye in time. So the official version from the family is that the boat was full, and so they couldn't get on it. There are some rumors circling that Helena, Mary's mother, was actually too scared to see Albin Vestera's mistress on his deathbed. How true that is, I can't say.
And was there a gap between the two deaths, or did they die together? Because I mean, I've heard stories that there was like a 6-hour gap.
Mary and Rudolph. Yeah, so Mary definitely died a couple of hours before because the doctors saw from the Totenflecken, what is that in English? Like the rigor mortis and also the marks that you get on your body, they had been there for definitely a few hours before Rudolph killed himself. Where it gets confusing is that Loschek, so the valet of Rudolph, of course, I guess wants to cover up his tracks because I guess he heard the shot that killed Mary because his bedroom was right next to Rudolph's. And he says that, you know, he heard 2 gunshots right after each other in the early hours of the morning. But if the medical report says Mary was dead, you know, for a few hours before, it gets very confusing.
So he sat with this dead body beside him. I mean, one has to sort of wonder what was going through his head.
Yeah. I think he was too scared to die alone, which is one of the reasons why he offered the suicide pact. And I think he thought that if he had someone else's blood on his hands, he would then have to go through with his own death. So he wrote to his mother that he, in his suicide note, that he had killed, and so now he also had to die. And he calls Mary his atoning angel in the suicide notes as well. So I think there's something going on in terms of, yeah, I need someone who's going to atone for my sin, and also I'm way too scared to do this. But if I kill someone else, then I have to go through with my own death.
And was there any other element, a political element to this, or was it all purely personal?
I can't say for sure because the sources are a bit confusing when it comes to the political side of things. I don't think there was some kind of huge plot of him, you know, taking over the throne of Hungary, for example. But I think he felt politically hopeless. I think he was quite a visionary and he saw the direction Europe was going in. Then he saw Kaiser Wilhelm on the throne, who he really didn't agree with, you know, personally or politically. And I think he just felt hopeless and felt that there was nothing he would be able to do. And aside from that, Franz Josef was very healthy, and you know, if Rudolph was going to be emperor, it would be a long, long time in the future.
So
Because,
his,
I mean,
sorry, his death, it may not have had a political cause, but it had a
Mhm.
massive political effect, didn't it? I mean,
Mhm.
you might argue it changed the course of history.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, I'm not a political historian by any means, but I do think that it definitely accelerated World War One. I think there were already too many things going on within Europe that meant it would happen at some point. But of course, you know, with no Rudolph, then you've got Franz Ferdinand eventually as heir to the throne, then you've got Sarajevo. So I think it does accelerate things.
And Franz
because I mean,
Ferdinand was a different kind of a prince, was he? He took his ideas were very different to Rudolph's.
Yeah. So Rudolph was much more liberal. I forgot to mention actually, it might be an interesting point, was that Rudolph kept saying, "Oh well, Franz Ferdinand is going to be the emperor, not me." But yeah, they were very different. They had different expectations about the future kind of layout of Habsburg monarchy and how this was going to look, how it was going to be shaped.
because Rudolph didn't have an heir, and that was a sort of concern, wasn't it? So
Yeah,
he would have
exactly.
eventually moved across through his father's
hmm
brother down to Franz Ferdinand.
hmm Yeah, because Rudolph had a daughter. I actually see her on a picture right in front of me, and yeah, he couldn't give Stephanie any more children because, I mean, everyone says that he had syphilis. Actually, he didn't have syphilis. He had gonorrhea, but of course, this is not so treatable as it is nowadays. And he infected Stephanie with this. And there was a big cover up for a long time. Stephanie herself didn't know what she had. It just developed to the point that she had a peritonitis, or however you pronounce it, and she was no longer to have any more children. So,
Golly.
yeah.
He sounds
No.
like the world's worst husband. I mean, he's obsessed with death. He's having affairs. He's giving his wife VD.
Yeah.
Perhaps we were best rid of him. Sorry. Sorry.
Yeah, I get a lot of people telling me this, you know, when they found out that this is my research area. People tend to go on a rant about how we're so much better without Rudolph. And I'm like,
But do you
yeah,
like? There must be
well,
something in him that you like. He's on your wall.
Yes. Why are you so fascinated by them?
yeah, he is on my wall multiple times, unfortunately. Um, and where do I start? Firstly, I'm definitely more interested in Mary. I'm pretty sure I would not die in a suicide pact with someone, but I have to be honest, I see a lot of myself in her. I was also, from a young age, very interested in the Gothic and the melodramatic and this kind of thing. And I just then felt that she was treated very unjustly, not just in what happened directly after she died, but also by historians. And I had a feeling, okay, what is being said here is maybe not quite the truth, and I want to dig a little deeper. In terms of Rudolph, hi, Brunhilde the cat. I'll show you. Whoop, there she is. Just
Oh,
she's a Valkyrie.
we have two guests this week. Excellent.
Yeah, honestly, so popular. In terms of Rudolph, I wouldn't say I necessarily think that he's a great person, but again, I was always interested in the tragic and in the melancholy. And what really got me interested in him was his death. And then I started to get interested in the events of his life as well. He just this intelligent, sensitive person. Some things I do struggle with. So he's very scientifically minded. I'm very not scientifically minded. So that's a bit of a struggle in the archive sometimes. But yeah, I would say the real interest is definitely Mary.
And you talk about archives, but have quite a lot of the archives just vanished? I mean, you talk about a cover-up.
Yeah, so let me put Brunhilde down because she's very chunky, very heavy. Yeah, so there's a huge problem with Mayerling that some things disappeared and then they reappear. So for example, the police files, they disappear from the police archives and then they reappeared in Berlin, I think in like the 50s or the 1960s. So they'd been removed under during the Nazi era. As for the Vestera archive, that's an interesting story. So in the 20th century, you had what's his name now? Herman Twistoon, and he becomes the family archivist. And he has all of these letters, all of these photos. And then after he dies, they go missing. And, you know, there's these rumors of, oh, well, he had all of these cats like mine who peed all over everything, unlike mine. So, you know, that they peed all over these documents and this kind of thing. It's not true because these letters that were under his care now start to pop up in various auctions everywhere. You've got things in various private family archives that I've been able to access for my book. Then you've got the Tafel papers, the famous Tafel papers of the Prime Minister at the time. I have a really good feeling from a lot of research of where they are. I won't say where they are or where I think they are before I publish my book. But yeah, that's one thing. Yeah, a lot of things get suppressed, a lot of things disappear, but a lot of things then reappear over the course of time. Like Mary's suicide notes, they reappeared in 2015.
Didn't they reappear and they've been in a bank vault in Vienna and then it seemed to be put online in Australia or something?
What had happened was that Helena had asked her relatives to destroy these letters and the other photos and like Mary's hair that she kept. This doesn't happen, so it actually gets put in this box of things gets put in this bank in Vienna that Helena herself is actually, you know, she had an account at this bank, and that just got forgotten about because, you know, people in the family died, no one came to claim it, and of course, every so often, you know, these banks will do a check of their archives and suddenly they found these letters in there. So now they're actually in the National Library here in Vienna. They haven't left Vienna. But yeah, you found Mary's suicide notes in there, as well as a very important document. It's a letter from Hermione Tobis, and she was Mary's piano teacher, but also a very good friend. And Mary told Hermione basically everything about her affair with Rudolph. So Hermione then wrote a big letter to Hannah Vestera, Mary's sister, copying out some of Mary's letters to her. You know, it gives us evidence of when they first met, how she felt about Rudolph. So she would say things like, he's my God, he's my everything. If I could give my life to see him happy, then I would do it, because what's the point in life anyway? So with this find in 2015, you have such an important source, also in terms of the family, the Baltazzi Vestera family itself, because you've got a load of photos as well. So it was a really amazing find.
And what happened to, for example, Elizabeth, the daughter?
Of Rudolph. So she's not my speciality, but she very famously becomes a socialist. So she gets known as the Red Archduchess. She really pushed through to marry a prince that was not quite the same status as her, but she was Franz Josef's favorite granddaughter, so eventually he allows it. They have a horrible time. She shoots his mistress, you know.
What a world.
So running in the family.
I can see why you're interested in this.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. It's endlessly entertaining. I mean, obviously incredibly sad, but there's a lot of stuff going on. And eventually when they divorce, she marries I can't remember his first name now, but his surname is Petzniak, and she's a socialist. She's very active in this. And after the fall of the monarchy, she actually is the reason why a lot of the Habsburgs' personal collections remained in Austria, because she gave it to the state. So, photos, furniture, all of this kind of stuff.
I've seen a lot of the pictures you put up on Twitter, especially one recently about they still do some kind of annual ball. And it's absolutely beautiful, and the music is stunning, obviously, and the dresses, and the men in their lovely white tie, whatever they're wearing. But there's a kind of elegance to that world that clearly appeals to you, and I can see why. But also, in the middle of all that, just kind of endless misery and lies and deceptions and affairs and people shooting each other and various people shooting other people. I don't know. What's your kind of overall feeling about the Habsburgs?
About the Habsburgs. Well, if you take a look around my apartment, it's covered in pictures of the Habsburgs. So I'm definitely very interested, of course. I couldn't give an overall view because, of course, we think, oh, well, it's just a ruling family. They're all individual people with completely individual lives, different experiences. And so I'm fascinated by them. I'm fascinated by this world, especially the end of the sorry, Amadeus is here again, the end of the 19th century, this kind of world dancing towards death. For example, I'm a really big fan of Empress Zita, despite her saying that it was an assassination. She, to me, is the opposite of Mary. Mary, to me, is very open. She's very emotional. And I feel like I can read her like a book. Whereas Zita, I mean, Otto von Habsburg said she's an iron lady. I can't read her at all, and that's why she's so fascinating to me.
But it's inspired so many things. I saw there was a Japanese manga. There's a Sherlock Holmes story, a spoof based on it. I mean, famous clearly ballet. I mean, it's clearly touched a chord creatively. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there, isn't it? Films and books and operas.
Yeah, sorry, Amadeus is right here, and I can tell he wants to jump on my back, so I'm just gonna pick him up before he does that. Yeah, the ballet, that is a really fantastic creative version of this story, because given the amounts of sources that were actually available at the time it was written, it's really accurate. I mean, of course, it has to condense some things. Sorry, Amadeus wants to play fight with me. And it's so beautiful. It uses Franz Liszt music, so of course it fits the time period, and you really see it's not romanticized, this relationship between Mary and Rudolph, because you do have to put into question, she was 17, she was basically a child. Her family saw her as a child, society saw her as a child, and you really get this impression of him taking advantage of her through the choreography. A lot of the films are very romanticized, as kind of Romeo and Juliet kind of story. I don't know how I feel about it, because when it comes to films, I'm very happy to be entertained and not so worried about historical accuracy. But given what happened and the amount of pain that these two people went through and their families then went through, it does make me question things a bit. There's also a German musical where Mary is completely different. She's very politically, involved and this kind of thing, whereas the real Mary wasn't.
And what's happened to the lodge where they killed themselves? Because I think it's still a sort of a place that people go to, pilgrimage.
Yeah. So it was torn down, apart from a couple of things like the tea pavilion, and a Carmelite convent was built on its place. So it's kind of, from Franz Josef's point of view, a place of atonement for what happened. And there are still Carmelite nuns there, and they pray for Rudolph and Mary every day. So the official reason for its foundation was just to pray for Rudolph, but the sisters do pray for Mary as well, and they have a visitor center and museum. And so the altar in the church is actually built on the sides of the bed where they were found dead.
Wow.
Gosh. And what was the impact on Franz Joseph of this? And what was the relationship that he had with his son?
It was a difficult relationship. We do have to remember the expectations of parenting, like in general, were different at this time, never mind for an emperor and an heir to the throne. They were very different. So Rudolph was closer in temperament to his mother. But Rudolph, you see, as a child, he wanted to impress his father so bad. I actually cried a little bit in the archives when I read the letters of child Rudolph to his father because he wants to impress him. He's bombarding him with questions. He wants to know everything. He just wants to be like the emperor and he wants to be worthy of him. That being said, they do have different political ideas. There's a lot of mistrust around Rudolph because he's writing anonymous political articles, sometimes against the emperor himself. So it's complicated. There is also the story that they had a huge fight just before Rudolph went to Mayerling. Again, if this happened, can't really say what the content was, can't really say. So it was difficult, but Franz Josef was completely broken by the death of his only son, his heir to the throne. So he broke down in the Capuchin crypt during the funeral. He was actually very well supported by his wife and his daughters, though, who he said were like angels for him. But what really, really annoyed him was the rumors of assassination. So Marie Valerie, Rudolph's sister, wrote all about this in her diary and said it's just absolutely ridiculous that people think that we would lie about something so terrible that really hurts us, and just didn't understand these assassination theories going around.
So if Rudolph had lived, I mean, could you give informed speculation of what might have happened?
If Rudolph had lived, um, I wonder if he would have even made it to be emperor because his health was so weak. A lot of people like to say that he was a huge drug addict, which is not actually true. I mean, it's in every film, he's injecting himself with various substances. He wasn't, so he did take morphine occasionally. You can see it in the pharmacy books. But he was very, very mild in his morphine intake compared to other members of the imperial family, like his mother. So this idea that, oh, he was a drug addict and he just would have died anyway, I don't think is true. I think it's so hard to say with the political situation. So Rudolph himself would sometimes say that he saw himself as the president of a republic rather than a prime minister. And he was complicated in that he could be kind of anti-court and anti-aristocracy, but then of course he wanted to be treated like the crown prince. I don't know. Franz Josef lived for such a long time. Would Rudolph have been healthy enough to be an emperor when it finally got to it? I really have no idea, but it's interesting to think about for sure.
No, it's a turning point in history, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, well, I can't wait for your book. I hope it's well illustrated. I bet it is.
Yeah, well, I'm very lucky that I have a lot of stuff in my own collection that I mean, a lot of it I inherited from another Mayerling researcher, which is going to save me on the reproduction costs for pictures. But yeah, I found a lot of beautiful pictures in various archives that haven't been published before, so I really hope I can get those in there as well.
And when's your book coming out?
I hope next year. So the thing is that this has been going on for such a long time, for various reasons. So I'm in contact with one side of Mary's family, and I've already gotten some letters from them, but there are more that I need to view. Neither of us have time until July. So that's kind of delayed things, whereas everything is basically finished. It's just that kind of last viewing of the letters. I don't think there's going to be anything mind-blowing, but it's still insights into Mary and her personality and her connections with her family. The other reason being I'm working 40 hours on another research project about Franz Ferdinand's court photographer, so that steals a lot of my time. So I'm hoping next year, finally. But it is a struggle. It's that kind of thing of I keep discovering things. When do you stop? It's hard.
Yes,
And
we're
until
all
your book
familiar with
comes out,
that.
what would you recommend to listeners as the best single account of this episode?
It's difficult because the literature in English is a little bit dodgy. Either it's quite old or the most recent book. It's very well written. I don't want to just be horrible and mean and criticize it, but there are some very basic errors in it, and it propagates the abortion theory, I think. So the best literature is unfortunately in German. But what has been translated, actually, Mary's grave was desecrated in the 90s and her bones were stolen. And there's an account of this written by Georg Marcus that was translated into English. So it also provides an overview of the events. It's called Crime at Mayerling, The Life and Death of Mary Vestera, I think.
Gosh. And why do you think people remain so fascinated by the story?
I think it all starts with, the cover-up. And then people hear all of these different rumors. It was the same for me. I came across this story when I was doing my bachelor degree, and I was like, what the heck is going on here? I skipped lectures so that I could read about it. I suppose it worked out in the end. So I think that's one thing. People are curious. They hear all of these different stories and, feel a little bit like a detective and want to get to the bottom of things. It's really fascinating. And yeah, I think some people are just a bit like me and like everything a bit gothic and melancholy, maybe watch the cartoon movie Anastasia a few times as a child and were inspired by this kind of thing. And I think for centuries we've been inspired by this star-crossed lovers kind of trope. I don't know if I would call them star-crossed lovers, but this is definitely how they're presented a lot of the time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you
Fascinating
so much.
story.
You've taken us back to a different time. And Andrew, of course, always lives in that century. But you described it in a much more colourful way than him. Very nice.
Yes,
to
I'm
meet
very
with you,
much
and
at home there.
we'll look out for your book, and when it's published, we'll have you back, and we'll certainly promote it.
Yeah, no, that would be really fun. Then we can go into a bit more detail about Mary, and Amadeus is back. I think he wants
Bye, Amadeus.
to say bye.
Okay, bye, Amadeus.
See you later. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.
More
Thank you so
coffee,
much.
more cake, more champagne. Bye-bye.
Yes. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the ScandalMongers podcast. This has been a Podcast World production. You can get in contact with our show by emailing team@podcastworld.org, placing ScandalMongers in the heading, or via our social media links within the show's bio.